Alright, this video is geared more at the director than camera operators, but certainly anybody's free to watch it if they want to. So I'm just going to talk about some of the control of some of this equipment here through the software interface. So on the laptop or the Surface tablet that we actually use. So we'll cover how some of this video switching is done through the on-screen interface, configuring media sources, setting up the audio, and actually camera control as well. Though I don't yet have a camera that uses that, I will just touch on it briefly. So that said, this is actually the ATEM software control software. So this is what controls the switcher. So if we wanted to change preview source, we can do that through these buttons here. And for purposes of this video, I'll use the mouse so you can see where it is that I'm touching. But of course, this is a touchscreen device, so you can actually touch any one of these things as well. And the upper portion here is the program feed. I don't recommend changing the program on the fly, but if somebody wanted to, for example, cut to camera 1 by clicking on that and cutting back to camera 5, which is, in this case, the laptop output itself. So you can switch on the bus there. A couple other things that are interesting here. So down here we have the preview transition button. So what this does is actually allows you to preview what a transition will look like before it goes live. So pressing this and then, for example, moving the T-bar won't actually change the program feed. What you'll see is the transition itself being done on the preview monitor instead of the program monitor. So that will allow you to see how long a transition will last, what it looks like, etc. And once you've previewed the transition, you just click on the preview transition button again to turn that off. We have different automatic transitions here. Simple cut we typically use, and then the auto, which is typically a dissolve, like so. So above that, we're able to choose the transition style. So a mix would typically be the default, and there's also a dip, which dips to black between switching shots. Then we have a wipe and sting, which I haven't configured one, and then DVE with digital video effects. So in this case, it's pushing the previous video off to the side. So we can set that as there. Of course, all of this can also be done on the USB control device, but should that be malfunctioning, we can very quickly jump over to the software and control it there as well. So also on this same screen is where we can set up upstream and downstream keys. So these buttons right here are upstream keys 1 through 4, and then over here we have the downstream keys. The difference between those is basically where it appears in the different layers of video. So an upstream key is typically used when it's tied to a transition. So for example, if you have a camera that's on a particular talent and you want to do a lower third with their name, you would typically want to have that lower third be part of the upstream key. So when you switch to their shot, it's there as part of the shot, and then when you switch away, it goes away. So if you had 4 different people that you're shooting, each one has their own camera, you could tie an upstream key to a particular shot, and then when you switch to it, the title comes on, and then when you switch away, the title goes away. So that's where upstream keys are used. Downstream keys typically stay on the screen when you're switching shots. So for example, if you're going to have a little bug in the lower right-hand corner, yeah, there we go, lower right-hand corner of the screen, that would be done with the downstream key. Also, if we are doing titles to, or the words to a song, and we have those appear on screen, those would be downstream key, and those are turned on and off through these options here. Actually, configuring those options is done up through here. So we've got the 4 upstream keys, and then we have the downstream keys here. We also have other options in here for setting up transitions. So for example, if we want to configure the DVE, for example, we want to have it go to the lower right-hand corner instead of going to the right. And you can set that option there. There are several different screens. This one actually does a stretch. Then we've got some tumbling options and spinning out of the frame as well. So those are done with the DVEs. Stinger, I'll talk about a little more about that when we actually get to the media player. Wipes, you can also control the wipe effect. So, oops, I actually need to select wipe on here. So I go down here and select wipe as a transition type. There we go. So now it's top to bottom. Then we have inside out, horizontal and vertical, and then corners and so forth. So those options are configured in the transitions palette here. There's also options for borders. You can set it where it reverses the direction each time. So we do the flip-flop option. So this button here changes the direction, and then the flip-flop option switches the direction every time we do a transition. All right. So we won't talk in detail about the keys, but with each one of the keys there is a fill source, which is basically the video that's going to be visible, and then there's a key source, which determines which parts of the image are actually transparent. So if, for example, we wanted to have a bug in the lower right-hand corner, we would have an image that had, we normally use a luma key for that, so basically means anything that's black becomes transparent. So in that case, we would choose the image with the bug on a black background as both the fill and the key. If we wanted to make something partially transparent, we could actually supply two different images, one that has the bug in it, and then we don't care about the background color because we're going to use a separate key image to say this part down here with the bug is going to be semi-transparent, or it's going to be fully opaque, or whatever you want, and then the rest of the image is going to be transparent. So that's actually set up within the upstream key settings as well. So it also supports a chroma key, so if we're shooting against a green screen, we can key out the green in the background. There are also patterns that can be used, and then we can also use the DVE. The DVE in this case would typically be used for something like a picture-in-picture. The DVE basically says, I'm going to resize this image, and I'm going to put it on this portion of the screen. So if you need to do a picture-in-picture, that's actually done through the DVE feature of the upstream key. Now if we come down to the downstream key, there are two of them. There's number 1, and then there's number 2. These also support luma key only. So typically what we would do is have an image where black shows through and anything else becomes opaque and visible, or at least slightly opaque and visible. So whenever we happen to do a lower third that stays on screen between shots, we would use the downstream key for that. We'd also use that for, say, the words for a song. That's done through the downstream keys. All right. And with that, we'll move over to the media tab. Now, the switcher actually can hold quite a few still images. It'll hold up to 32 still images, and it will also hold up to 2 video clips in its memory. These are erased when the switcher is turned off, so even if I preset them before an event, they would disappear. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to load in one of the images. In order to do that, I navigate to it and then drag and drop it into one of the stills placeholders. That doesn't actually make it visible to anything, and from there what I need to do is I actually need to put it in one of the 2 media players. So that's just a quick drag and drop over to there. Now if I select media player 1 and then switch to it, that particular graphic will be visible. I'll place a different version of that in still number 2 and then put that in media player 2. So if I switch to media player 1, you'll see that image, and then if I switch to media player 2, you'll see the other image, which is in this case just basically the same but a little bit bigger. So that's what's going on with that. There can also be video clips, as I mentioned. For example, I have some transitions that I store on the memory card here, and if we want to use one of those, what we do is we drag and drop the folder containing that transition. So you can see this is a series of PNG images. We actually drag the whole folder into the clip. The downside here is this actually takes a little while to load. So it's something you'd want to do well ahead of time and not wait until a few seconds before you try to use one of those clips, because it does take a while, even over the fast network that we have set up in the device, in the switcher rack. So you can see it's still loading. This is actually just a 1-second clip, so you can imagine how long it would take to load something that's a little longer. The switcher only holds, I think it's a total of 360 frames for the video. So we would never use this for media playback. It's only for doing animations, quick animations on screen. So while that's loading, I'm actually going to go back over to the switcher tab, and I'm going to put that into a transition. And when we use a graphic as part of a transition, we'll call that a stinger. And what that basically does is it animates the graphic, and then it transitions shots somewhere in the middle of that graphic. Typically, there will be one frame in a graphic that completely fills the screen, which allows you to switch shots without that transition being visible. So we'll set that up here. So what we're saying here is we're going to be setting up a stinger. The source for that stinger is going to be media player 1. Let's see if it's finished loading. Yes, it has. Okay. All right. So media player 1 is going to contain that stinger. It's a 1-second clip. The trigger point is 14 frames in there, so that would be the frame that actually fills the screen. And the mix rate tells how many frames to actually perform the transition, and then pre-roll indicates how many frames are rolled before it actually does the transition. Now if I select stinger and hit select stinger for the type. That's right. I've loaded the clip into the clip store, but I didn't load it in the media player, so now I need to drag that over. Okay, so now when I do the transition, you'll see the graphic. So that's how we actually do a stinger transition. We load it into one of the two media players and then use the DVE as part of the transition, and then set the transition type to stinger. So as we come back here, you'll see we're on sting, media player 1 selected under the stinger tab. So that's that. Now at that point we can leave the stinger in there and still do our normal dips, wipes, etc. Like we can even use the DVE. So select DVE here. Oops, I didn't do that. There we go. So we can still select the DVE, even though it might be used for something else. All right. Okay. Moving on to the audio tab. So this actually shows a virtual mixer for the audio, and this coming into the switcher. So there's an audio source for each one of the cameras that's connected. On this switcher there's 10 sources, so we actually see 10 different audio sources. My audio is currently going through camera 1, so that's why you see the camera 1 level meters moving as I'm talking. Camera 8 here, you see that there's audio on that. Camera 8 in this case is actually connected to the video recorder, and so basically what you're seeing there is the program feed being fed through the recorder back into input 8 on the switcher, and that one's moving. That's why that one's moving. And input 9 is being used for the 2x2 multi-viewer, which also passes audio, and I have to run that through one of the inputs on the switcher in order to pass tally information to the cameras. So that's why you're seeing that. The media players actually can have audio associated with them as well. So if we go back to the media tab, you can see this is the video portion, and then there's an audio portion as well. In this case, it's empty, but if we wanted to have some sort of sound effect to go along with that transition, we can drop that in there, and then that would play along with the transition, but only if the media player inputs are actually turned on. At the bottom of these things, there's a couple different buttons. There's an on button, and if I actually was to press this, you'd stop hearing my audio, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. When I press it again, then now all of a sudden you can hear me because the audio from camera 1 is now being recorded as part of the program feed. We can adjust the level through the fader here, and then there is a pan knob down here. So if we're using camera audio, and we got a camera on the left side of the room and a camera on the right side of the room, we could actually pan the audio from the camera on the left to the left, and pan the audio from the camera on the right to the right. There's also another button here that's called AFV, and I'll turn that on for camera 2 here. What that means is audio follows video. So essentially, instead of being on all the time, that audio source is only actually active whenever that camera is live or in a transition. So for example, if we're shooting a sporting event and there's a camera on the crowd and you want to be able to hear their audio, you can hit AFV on that, and then when you switch to that shot, the audio for that camera is live, and then when you switch away, the audio for that camera is actually turned off. So it makes it easier to turn audio on and off coming from particular cameras that might not necessarily always want to have live audio for those. In addition to that, there's a couple other sources, audio sources here. There's actually an RCA input on the back of the switcher, which is not currently connected to anything, and then there's an XLR input. So if we're actually doing an event where we're doing the audio, in addition to doing video, we will run the audio from the mixing board into the XLR connectors on the switcher, and you can see here that that's actually already turned on. So I can turn that off as we're not using it at the moment, but if we wanted to include audio from an external mixer, you plug into the XLR inputs and then turn that option on right there to make sure that audio gets included. Now, one other thing here, there are some XLR outputs on the back of the switcher. Under normal circumstances, those outputs would be just outputting the program audio. However, I've reconfigured the switcher. This is one of the options that it has, in order for those outputs to be a monitor or solo mode. So you could preview the audio for a particular camera or whatever without having that audio go live. So I did that in the settings. And basically, these headphone icons down here at the bottom of the screen indicate which of those audio feeds is being fed to those XLR outputs. So that's totally separate from the main camera feed. So if I deselect all these, the XLR outputs on the back of the panel are actually, there's nothing on them. They're totally silent at the moment. If I go ahead and click on this, and we'd be getting audio from the main camera going through those XLR outputs. So in that way, we can effectively build a separate mix if we need to preview audio on a set of headphones or studio monitors or whatever. We can choose those sources using the headphone icons that are down here. And then bottom right is actually where you control that level. So, all right, and then the last tab here, this is actually where you can paint the cameras. I do have one Blackmagic camera on the way. It'll be here before we do our next event. And you'll be able to paint the cameras remotely through this interface. So you can use this to set the gain pedestal. This one controls the I believe that's the focus. Here we control the zoom, and then you can set the lift, gamma, and then gain here. So if you need to make the midtones more blue, you can come in here and grab that and move it over. And down here you're seeing how much those things are being tweaked. So let's go ahead and reset that. Reset it all. You can also expand this and get the full color corrector within the software. So this is where you can actually set the contrast, hue, saturation, RGB, and adjust the colors for the lift, gamma, and gain on the screen. So this may be easier to do with the touch screen than it is with the mouse, but that can be used to control Blackmagic cameras. You can set the coloring on the Blackmagic cameras using this feature. And like I said, I actually have one coming. So by the way, there's the gain, there's the shutter speed, and there's the white balance as well. So all those things can be set remotely. In order to do that, one of the SDI outputs of the switcher has to be connected to the SDI input of the camera, and then all the commands to control the camera are sent over that SDI connection. So anyway, that's about it. There's other things that the software does, but those are kind of the highlights. The other thing I wanted to kind of go over here just briefly is the Video Hub configuration software. So what I have in the back of this rack, and you can't see it at the moment, is a 40 input by 40 output video router. That allows me to send any of 40 video inputs to any combination of 40 outputs. So if we have camera 1 and we want that to go to the input 1 of the switcher, but we also want to send it to an external recorder, that can be done through the Video Hub router. This software here is actually what controls that. So on the left here, this is where you select the source for the different outputs. So for example, if we want to change the video that's showing on the left LCD on the rack, we scroll down to the bottom here, and then we can do the drop down. And then, for example, here we might want to choose the ATEM preview instead of the multi-view. So you'll see here that it's actually not showing. No, yeah, it is. That's showing the preview instead of the multi-view that it was showing before. Now if I switch it back to ATEM multi-view, you'll see that video has changed. It's now showing the ATEM multi-view instead of the preview. So most of in fact, I think at this point all of the outputs are being used. I still have a handful of unused inputs, so if we needed to hook up some other video sources, we could. The first 10 inputs here on the right are basically the first 10 channels of the switcher. And from there we get into a USB Ultra Studio SDI capture device. TN analog is the SDI to analog converter that we use for outputting standard def, for hooking into a standard def system. Then we have HyperDeck recorders. Right now I only have 2, but I've allocated for up to 2 more. And then we've got their auxiliary outputs on the back, which we typically use for doing individual isolated camera feeds. So, you know, if we've set up the little recorders and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever, those outputs are actually set up here. So camera 1 goes to aux 1, aux out 1, and so forth. Down here below that we have video converters that are being run. These are a couple of red boxes that are in the back of the device, which convert between different video formats. So, for example, with the CineStage events, I use one of the converters to convert to 1080p for the projector, because the projector, for some odd reason, doesn't recognize a 1080i signal that we're switching, and so I use one of the 2 converters in order to convert that upscale that to 1080p. That's converter 1, and you can see here we've got ATEM aux 3 selected as the source, and that's why we're able to switch the view going to the projector separate from the program feed, because it's using the switcher's auxiliary outputs in order to make that selection. Alright, and then the next 4 sources are the multi-viewer that goes to the cameras. So typically we set that to cameras 1, 2, and 3, and then the program feed. But if we wanted to change that, we could actually, for example, send camera 4 in the lower right corner instead of the program feed. And that's just set up through here. These next 4 are discrete outputs on the back of the switcher rack, and then we've got the audio for the intercom. Sorry, the video for the intercom. So in this case, we're sending the multi-viewer out to the intercom, which means that's what's being received by all the cameras. If we wanted to send the program feed, we could actually select that here, change it. There is a optical converter device in the rack, and that's on output 34. We have engineering monitors, director monitors. So when we hook up whenever we hook up the OLED monitor when we're doing productions, that is done on director monitor 1. So internally inside, that's actually output number 37. And then we have a second director monitor as an option, and then the left and right LCDs in the rack as well. So that's how we reroute signals. So we go into that software if we need to change what's displayed on one of these monitors, or we need to change what's going up to the projector, or even what's being recorded. That's actually done through this Video Hub routing software. So that's it for the software that I wanted to cover in terms of the equipment within the rack. We can actually talk about the software for controlling the Sony camera another time. So for now, that's going to be it, and we'll chat later.